Assalamu alaikum dear students. Today we will discuss the basic mathematics behind this electron paramagnetic resonance spectroscopy. As we know that electron is a charged particle. Electron is a charged particle. Electron is a charged particle, and also we know one more thing, that it revolves around the nucleus and also rotates on its own axis. It revolves around the nucleus, that means it has a orbital motion, and also it rotates on its own axis, that means it has spin on its own axis. So there we can show this like we can show this like this. It is a nucleus in the center of an atom, and the electron revolves around this nucleus in anti-clockwise direction or in clockwise direction. Okay, so there is two type of motion. One is it revolves around the nucleus, and also it has a spin on its own axis, that means it rotates on its own axis. And there also it can be in clockwise direction, anti-clockwise, clockwise or anti-clockwise. Okay, fine. So when an electron revolves around the nucleus in a circular orbit, in classical mechanics we say that the electron revolves around the nucleus in the circular orbit, then it is associated with some orbital angular momentum. That orbital angular momentum will be given by L is equal to mvr, where L is the orbital angular momentum and m is the mass of the electron, v is the velocity of the electron around the at which velocity it revolves around the nucleus, and r is the radius of this orbit. Since we consider classical according to the classical view of mechanics, we consider it a circular orbit, so this r is the radius of that circular orbit. So this we can show this like in vector form. L is equal to p cross v, p cross r, sorry. It can be shown like this, because p is the linear momentum, it is equal to the m into v, and cross r is the radius of the orbit. So the angular momentum, orbital angular momentum vector can be given by this equation. We'll put it equation 1. This equation will show us that what can be the direction of the orbital angular momentum. For example, if this electron moves in the anti-clockwise direction, that means the velocity vector will be in this direction, tangential to this circular orbit, and r will be towards the center. This will be the r vector. So since linear momentum depends on velocity, so p cross r will be, we have to move from v to r. That means we can take a screw and rotate it from v to r. It will come outside of this plane. That means the orbital angular momentum direction will be out of this plane, like this, because if we rotate a screw in this direction, that means from v to r, it will come outwards. That means the orbital angular momentum direction will be outwards in case of anti-clockwise direction. And in case of the clockwise direction, if it moves like this, electron moves like this, in that very direction the velocity vector will be in this direction, and at that very time v cross r, when we rotate it, v cross r, it will go inside the plane. So the angular momentum, orbital angular momentum vector direction will be inside the plane. That means it will be downwards. Okay, so it depends on the direction of revolving or revolution of the electron around the nucleus. We know that when a charged particle moves, it forms current. So when this electron moves in this circular loop, it will form some current. That current will be given by I is equal to Q by T, because we know that current is the rate of charge flowing through a circuit per unit time. So it will be given by Q by T. We know the charge on an electron can be given by E, and T is the time. T is actually the time which it takes to complete one revolution in the loop. So how we can get this T? This T can be obtained because since we know that velocity is equal to distance divided by time. It implies time will be equal to distance divided by velocity, or we can write time is equal to distance. What is the distance? Total distance throughout this loop, it will be circumference of this circle, that is 2 pi r divided by v. So this will give us the time which the electron will take to complete one revolution in this circular orbit. So we can actually substitute this value of time in this equation. We will get that current will be equal to E divided by time. In place of time, we will write 2 pi r divided by v, or we can write is equal to E into velocity divided by 2 pi r. That means it is the product of electronic charge into velocity divided by 2 pi r, circumference of the circle. We will write this as equation second. And now when there is current formation in this loop, the direction of the current also depends on the direction of the motion of the electron. If the electron is moving in the anti-clockwise direction, that means the direction of current will be opposite of that. It will be tangential opposite to the opposite to the direction of motion of the electron. If it is anti-clockwise, the direction of current will be in the clockwise direction. Similarly, if the direction of motion of electrons is clockwise, the direction of the current will be anti-clockwise. So this is the current which we obtained from here. Now we'll move on to the magnetic moment. When a charged particle is in motion, there is a magnetic moment associated with it. So this electron will also be associated with some magnetic moment. That magnetic moment will be given by equal to current multiplied by area. That is the current which this produces, the electronic motion, the current which this electronic motion produces, and multiplied by the area of this loop which it sweeps actually. So it will be equal to, for current we will give this value EV divided by 2 pi r multiplied by area of this loop will be pi r square, because it is circular, it will be pi r square. So this r and 1 among this will cancel, pi and pi will cancel. It will give us EV divided by EVR divided by 2. EVR divided by 2. If we multiply this EVR divided by 2 by M divided by M, so what we will get? We will get, it will be E divided by 2M into MVR. MVR. As I already told that MVR is the orbital angular momentum, so we will get it, it will be equal to 2E by 2M into L, because MVR is equal to the orbital angular momentum, that is L. So we got the orbital magnetic moment is equal to E by 2M L. If we put it in the vector form, what we will get? We will write mu L, that means orbital magnetic moment. It will be equal to E by 2M L, where L is the orbital angular momentum quantum number. L is equal to orbital angular momentum quantum number. But since we know that when the electron revolves around the this nucleus in the anti-clockwise direction, I told you that the direction of the angular momentum will be, it will be V cross, or it will be outside the plane. But at this very time, when it is anti-clockwise, the direction of the current will be, it will be clockwise. Direction of the current will be clockwise. So this magnetic moment is given by current multiplied by area. So it will be, current will be in this, if it is going anti-clockwise, then current will be in this direction, or we can, its vector can be shown like this. I, when we take the multiple of I cross R, because it R is the function of area, so I cross R at this very time, I cross R will be in, it will go inside, the screw will go inside. If we rotate the screw from I to R, it will go inside the board. That means when orbital angular momentum was out of the plane, the magnetic moment is inside the plane. That means orbital angular momentum and the orbital magnetic moment, they are opposite in direction. When they are opposite in direction, then we put a minus sign here. So orbital magnetic moment will be given by negative of E by 2M orbital angular momentum, and from this what we will get, since this is for the orbital motion of the electron. Similarly, the electron which rotates on its own axis, it will be also associated with some angular momentum, and that angular momentum is called spin angular momentum. Spin angular momentum is an intrinsic form of angular momentum associated with the electron, and that can be written as mu s will be equal to minus E by 2M S. That is spin angular momentum. S is the spin angular momentum. Spin angular momentum, and E is electronic charge, that is 1.6 in 10 to the minus 19 coulomb, and M is mass of electron. So we got spin magnetic moment equal to minus E by 2M multiplied by the spin angular momentum vector. Then we can, since experimentally what we have seen, that this value of spin magnetic moment does not satisfy the experimental value. The calculated value from this does not satisfy the experimental values. There is some lagging by some factor. So this value lags by some factor in the experimental values, and so we multiply this by some factor so as the conditions can be maintained. So the factor which we add, that is nu s is equal to minus ge e by 2m into s. That means this factor ge we add here for free electron, so as the calculated values from this, they are exactly equal to that what we get in the experimental conditions. So this factor, what is this ge? Ge is the Landy factor or Landy splitting factor, we can say. Factor, or we can say spectroscopic constant. So to meet the experimental requirements, we needed to multiply this value by a factor, by a constant, which is this Landy splitting factor or spectroscopic constant. Okay. So since we know that the magnitude of spin angular momentum can be given by magnitude of spin angular momentum can be given by s magnitude is equal to under root of s into s plus 1 h cross, where small s is equal to spin quantum number. Spin quantum number. So what values we can get if we substitute this magnitude of s in this equation? What we will get? We will get mu s is equal to magnitude of mu s will be equal to minus ge e by 2m. For s we will substitute this. It will be under root of s into s plus 1 h cross. So, or we can write mu s is equal to minus ge e by 2m h cross under root of s into s plus 1. Okay. So this equation can be also written as mu s is equal to minus ge beta e under root of s into s plus 1, where beta e is equal to E h cross by 2m, and this is equal to Bohr magneton, Bohr's magneton, and its value is equal to 9.274 into 10 raised to power minus 24 joule per Tesla. This is the value for Bohr magneton, and it is a constant. As we know, h cross is h by 2 pi, it is a constant, electronic charge is constant, mass of electron is constant, as a total it is a constant, and it's called Bohr's magneton. Okay, fine. And now this equation, it is the spin magnetic moment, total spin magnetic moment. But if we want to take the spin magnetic moment in one direction, because it is almost impossible to take to calculate the spin magnetic moment in all the directions, so we will take one direction. Usually we are taking in the z direction. We are actually calculating the things in one component, that is in z component. So we will also write this in z component. We can write mu z, that means the magnetic moment, spin magnetic moment in the z direction, it will be given as minus GE beta E, and in place of this root of m s into s plus 1, it will be written as ms, where ms is equal to component of spin angular momentum in the z direction or z coordinate. Okay, because we are calculating the magnetic moment, spin magnetic moment in the z direction, then we have to take into consideration the angular momentum in the same direction. So it will come into this form. Okay, now since this magnetic this spin angular momentum got number is now associated with some spin magnetic moment, when we will put some external magnetic field, when we apply some external magnetic field on such electron, what will happen? This spin magnetic moment will interact with the applied field, applied external magnetic field, and the interaction will be given by E is equal to minus mu z into pz, where mu z is the spin magnetic moment in the z direction, and multiply by the applied magnetic field which was also applied in the z direction. So if we substitute the value of this mu z in this equation, what will happen? It will be like this, minus GE beta E ms multiplied by bz. So it will come out as GE beta E bz ms. So this will be the interaction between the two magnetic moments, the magnetic moment produced by the electron and the magnetic moment produced by the external magnetic field. So what will happen? Since we know that this ms, that means the spin angular momentum quantum number, it will it can have two values. Ms can have two values, that is plus 1 by 2 or minus 1 by 2. Plus 1 by 2 for anti-clockwise direction and minus 1 by 2 for clockwise direction. So what for these two type of orientations, what will be this E? E will be E for anti-clockwise will be equal to plus 1 by 2 GE beta E bz. Similarly, E is equal to E minus 1 by 2, that means clockwise direction, will be equal to minus 1 by 2 GE beta E bz. These will be the energies of the two states, and this one is called alpha state and this one is called beta state. and that means this will rise in energy and this will lower in energy. It can be shown like this. For example, firstly there was no applied magnetic field, they will be degenerate. That means ms is equal to plus 1 by 2 and minus 1 by 2. They are degenerate, but once the applied magnetic field was, the external magnetic field was applied, so what will happen, there will be splitting in the two energy levels, as I already told in the previous lectures. So the high state will be this alpha state. Alpha state will be is equal to plus 1 by 2 GE beta E Bz, and beta state will be equal to minus 1 by 2 GE beta E Bz. And the difference between these two energy levels, that is delta E. This delta E will be given by delta E will be equal to E plus 1 by 2 minus E minus 1 by 2 subscript. It will be equal to 1 by 2 GE beta E Bz minus 1 by 2 GE beta E Bz. Okay, so it will come out GE beta E Bz. Delta E, the difference in the energy levels, will be given by this equation. So this delta E will be equal to GE beta E Bz. Okay, so as you can see from here, the change in energy levels, that means the splitting in the energy levels, is directly proportional to the external magnetic field. That means if we increase the external magnetic field, the delta E will be higher. Okay, so when we have to undergo some transition in this system, how we will require that kind of radiation which has frequency equal to this delta E, then only the resonance can occur. So for resonance to take place, this the frequency of the radiation or the energy of the radiation, that will be given by h nu, should be equal to the difference in energy between the two levels, and that is equal to GE beta E Bz. That means this difference in energy is directly proportional to the applied field, and also the frequency required to undergo the resonance is also directly proportional to the external magnetic field applied. So if we increase the external magnetic field, we will require higher frequency, and if we decrease the external magnetic field, we will require lower frequency to undergo the resonance. That is why we use 0.33 Tesla magnet for 9 gigahertz frequency. On the contrast, we use 1.4 Tesla for 35 gigahertz. That means if we are increasing the strength of the magnet, we have to increase the frequency so as to get the resonance in the system. Okay, fine. So this is the basic mathematics behind the principle of electron paramagnetic resonance spectroscopy. So now we will move on to another topic. that is the graphical representation of EPR spectrum. Graphical representation of EPR spectrum. How actually we are presenting the EPR spectrum? I will tell you. In NMR, as you might have read, that in NMR what we do, we are taking the spectrum between magnetic field BZ versus the absorbance. In case of NMR spectroscopy, but here it is generally discouraged to take the spectrum like this. Why? Because in case of EPR spectroscopy, the peaks which we generally get, they are broader. So like the peaks come like this. So if this is the magnetic field and this is the absorbance, there is actually it is very difficult to find the maxima, because the peak is very broad, so we cannot exactly determine the maxima of this peak. The exact maxima is almost impossible to find from this very peak. So what we do, we take a derivative spectrum of it. How we will take that? For derivative spectrum, what we do, we will take magnetic field in this direction, and this will be the first derivative of absorbance. That means d absorbance by dBz. That means we will take the absorbance which we are getting here, we will take it as first derivative, d absorbance by dBz. That means it is dy by dx, and we know that dy by dx is dy by dx is called the slope. Dy by dx is equal to slope of the peak. So from here we are taking the dy by dx, and from this side we are taking the magnetic field. So what will happen? For example, we will see here, when this peak is progressing like this, the slope is increasing. It is increasing dy by dx. That means d absorbance by dBz, that is slope. The slope is increasing, and then it starts decreasing. And ultimately here at this very point, it actually is 0, because the y, this is the y-axis, this is the axis dy by dx. That means with x, the z is not from, if we see from this point to this point, the value of y is not changing that much with respect to x. That means at a particular point there will be one point where there will be exactly no change. That means 0 change of y with respect to x, and that will be the maximum point. So what we will do, for example, this is the, firstly what will happen, the peak will increase in slope and it will reach here. This is the maximum slope. That means maximum slope will be around this point, and then it starts decreasing again. Now slope will decrease. Ultimately it will come here 0. This will be, for example, this is the 0 value of dy by dx, or d absorbance by dBz, first derivative. And at this point, this maxima point, there will be no change in y with respect to x, so it will come here at the 0 value. And now the slope is again starts increasing, but in the negative direction. So we will go in the negative direction like this, and it will reach maximum up to here. So this will be the maximum slope, and maximum slope here. And now the slope starts decreasing, because now you can see from this point to this point, there is not much change in y with respect to x. So what will happen? It is decreasing and ultimately it will touch zero. If this slope reaches zero, this will touch this zero line here. So from this peak, this is the derivative peak which we usually use in the representation of EPR spectrum. This derivative peak will exactly give us the point of maxima which we could not see from here in this normal absorbance peak. So we are using this type of spectra in case of EPR spectrum. So I will explain again. Since in absorbance spectra we get a broad spectrum and it is difficult to actually see the maxima of our peak, then we use the first derivative. That means we are taking slope of absorbance on y-axis and applied magnetic field in the x-axis, on the x-axis, and then the derivative of absorbance changes like this, because once it reaches top and then the slope starts decreasing, and ultimately at the maxima it becomes zero, and at maxima the slope becomes zero, then again it increases in the negative direction, then finally it reaches the maxima negative slope, and then again starts decreasing, the slope will go towards the zero again. So this kind of spectrum is actually very helpful in the representation of this EPR spectrum. Okay.